What's going on? What's going on? About to sit here and dive into this Charlie Hodge interview. Um, I fuck with Charlie Hodge. I like his energy. I believe he was a good friend. So I'm about to check this out, see what he got to say, see what's going on in this whole presentation right here. Drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Let's get it.
I always knew I was supposed to do something special in my life, and it would have to do with entertainment, probably music. But what could a little kid from Decatur, Alabama possibly do that would matter to the world? One night, backstage in Memphis, I would find out. Elvis walked over to me, and my life was changed forever.
I'm Larry D. here in the Great Smoky Mountains. With me, a legend in his own time, Charlie Hodge. Charlie, you spent over 17 years of your life as one of the true legends of the 20th century. At all of Elvis's homes, there was always one bedroom. It was Charlie's bedroom. You performed with him on stage. You were in many of his movies. You were his vocal coach at one time and one of the best friends of his entire lifetime. You wrote a book, Me and Elvis, which today is a bestseller. And now this video.
There's been a lot of things said about Elvis all these years, and a good bit of that is made up by the press. Elvis fans all over the world have followed his life and death. And for a long time, I felt the real story should be told from someone who was there, you know, by his side. And I especially wanted Lisa Marie to know the truth about her dad. I wanted to share some of the pictures and home movies most people have never seen before. Some clips of the fun times we had, the Army, the music, the shows, personal family times, you know, the Elvis I knew. First of all, people should know that Elvis was a very intelligent man. He knew where he was going, and he knew how much he had to learn. He even realized after a time how big he was around the world. And he always had a plan and was in control. The staff had a logo we used on our jackets and everything, TCB. That meant taking care of business. That's what we did. That's what we wanted to do for Elvis. The entourage Elvis kept around him was made up of family members and friends. And I began to realize how important family was to Elvis when we were in the Army. I was singing with the Foggy River Boys in 1958 when I was drafted. And a stranger. After that first meeting backstage in Memphis, I would see Elvis again at Fort Hood. We both arrived for basic training about the same time. He remembered me, and we saw each other from time to time. Elvis's mother was very ill that summer, so the Army gave him some time to go home and see her. She died suddenly while he was there, and when Elvis got back, he was numb with grief. And before we knew it, we were on a troop train headed for the port to ship out. We became friends on this trip. It was about this time, I guess, that I started a role that I played the rest of my time with Elvis over the years. We were aboard ship, and Elvis had asked that I be assigned to the area where he put. They put Elvis up with the NCOs, the sergeants and everything, because all the soldiers wanted to get autographs of Elvis and pictures made with him and everything, and the only way he could get an arrest was to put him with a sergeant. So he didn't know anybody up there, and he asked that I be put up there with him. And of course, you know, it had only been a short time before that Elvis had lost his mother. And daytime was fine. We were going around the ship. We were playing with the accordion, band, and everything. And then at night, you know, after we went to bed, I could hear Elvis grieving in his bunk. And I would get down and I'd start telling him jokes and stories until he would laugh, until finally he was just getting exhausted and he was tired and he could just go to sleep. And I thought, well, you know, I didn't realize that what I began there wouldn't be just a trip across the ocean. It'd be a trip around the world with my main man, Elvis. What a life.
If there was anybody that was ever a friend and to Elvis Presley, it was Charlie Hodge.
I was fit shining my shoes in Barracks one day, and somebody came over from the first sergeant's office and said I had a phone call. Went over there and Lamar asked me, could I get a 15-day leave? Elvis wanted to go to Paris for 15 days. So I got permission, man, and got in touch with Elvis. We went 3 days in Munich, Germany, and then 10 days in Paris. So we got there, man, and the first thing we got there, we were exhausted. It's early in the morning, and we're up on a hill overlooking Paris. These people wanted to see the sunrise in Paris, and we were dying to go to sleep. So we started doing like all the tours. We were catching the show at the Lido de Paris, the Moulin Rouge. We tried to be like regular tourists and walk up down the Champs-Élysées, but they said, Elvis, you can walk around in Paris because they don't do stars like they do stars any place else. They leave you alone. And we said, good. We went for a walk on the Champs-Élysées, and you'd have thought France de Gaulle had come, Charles de Gaulle had come there, whatever his name was. And because the people hit us, and we had to fight our way to a movie theater, buy a ticket, and go in, and we called our driver that had the limousine. He'd come around and met us for the theater. We went straight through the theater, got the limousine and left. So we didn't try that anymore. But we'd go shopping at different little places and catch the shows, and it became a daily. I remember one time, we were riding up the Champs-Élysées between the Arc of Triumph and the Eiffel Tower. And Rex Mansfield and Elvis and I started singing a trio of some number. And we just kept singing the same song over and over again. And we were just going from one end of the street to the other one. And finally, you know, we said, Lamar, get out and go cancel the show. We were going to the Lido show at night, so we had Lamar go in and cancel it because it was more important. We were enjoying ourselves singing, just riding up and down there from the Champs-Élysées to the Eiffel Tower, down the Champs-Élysées, the Eiffel Tower, between the Arc of Triumph, you know. We just rode and sang and sang. And then the girls from the Lido show would come over and see us. And I remember one night they called, the theater called and said, could you have the girls come over? And we said, well, what's the problem? They said, well, we really would like to start the show. They'd been there all night. Elvis loved to watch the movies on the post, and he actually studied the actors. You know, he noticed that actors with dark hair lasted longer. His hair was naturally light, but after his first movie, Love Me Tender, he had it dyed black. I think it was a couple of months, maybe 6 weeks or so before we left Germany. We were having a little party at Elvis's house there at 14 Goethestrasse. I'll always remember that. And a guy from the Air Force that was a friend of ours brought this young lady over, and it was Priscilla. She was 14 years old at the time. And Elvis, I think, was just dumbfounded. I mean, he didn't hardly speak to anyone else the whole evening. He was just talking to her. And when she left that evening, he called me over and he said, Charlie, did you see the structure of her face? It's almost like everything I've ever looked for in a woman. So I think he decided that night that Priscilla was going to be his wife. It was a pretty good plan because it worked out. Elvis was getting ready to record his first album after getting back, and he asked me to go along to Nashville. When I asked him what I would do while he was busy recording, he said, well, we could sing All We'll Be Home Again like we did on the ship. That'll be the first full duet I've ever put on an album. We had harmonized our way through the Army. We were on our way to Nashville and to another step in our relationship as musicians. From that time, for well over a decade, life was a series of phenomenal events. Elvis interrupted the recording session to go to Miami to appear live with Frank Sinatra. He'd been out of the Army only about a month. After Nashville, we would embark on an incredible journey to California by train to do a movie. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, had reserved 2 railroad cars for Elvis and all the guys. One was a sleeping car and the other was a private dining car. If you can picture this scene, all along the tracks, at every little train station and crossroads, people stood to see and wave as Elvis and the train went by. Even though the train didn't stop there, they knew Elvis was on that train, much like the political campaigns years ago. Elvis was very quiet whenever he looked out. As I look back over my life, I don't think anything that happened to me was by chance. From 1961, I guess it was, to 1966, I used to get tired of sitting around the studio when they was doing movies because you go there, you get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, you don't do anything till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, then you go home and take a break. But, so I talked to Elvis about me going out and working some nightclubs with Jimmy Wakely. And because I'd known Wakely on the old Ozark Jubilee and I'd sung some with him, And so Elvis said, all right. And so I would go out and work these tours in Las Vegas, Lake Tahoe, and Reno with Wakely, and then come back in and do like the soundtrack for a movie thing with Elvis, and then we'd go somewhere else with Wakely. I remember one time we came in, and I walked in through the gate, and I said, and Elvis and them were loading up the bus. I said, have a heart, I just got off the road. And Elvis said, shut up, load your stuff, and let's go. So we loaded up, and Elvis had just gotten this 1963 Dodge mobile home. And we always followed it behind with a station wagon full of a trailer with all our clothes in it, so it wouldn't be so much stuff in the bus.
So kind of tell me, what was it really like to travel on the road with Elvis?
I know we'd drive sometimes, and we'd stop and we'd spend the day in a hotel because we'd drive all night long. Then get up that night, and sometimes Elvis would drive 100 miles and say, let's check back in another hotel. I don't feel like that. And we'd stop on the side of the road, and we'd throw footballs, and we'd do everything. But what Elvis was, he was really anxious, really, to get back home. That's one of the reasons he got the bus, so he could have everybody together and we could all go home together. I remember one time we was coming through Arkansas, and we was listening to George Klein on WHPQ radio. And he played a song by Tom Jones called The Green, Green Grass of Home. And that's the first time we had heard that. We had been out in Hollywood, I think, for 3 movies in a row, so we hadn't been home in probably 9 months, you know. And we listened to that, and every one of us started tearing up a little bit. And so Elvis pulled over to the next phone booth. He said, Joe, call George and tell him to play that song again. So Joe called George. He played it again. Elvis stopped at the next phone booth to call him and tell him to play it again. And this went all the way from over there in West Memphis, Arkansas, well, the other side of West Memphis, actually, so all the way through Memphis. So we got home. He was calling. Every time we'd run in the phone booth, call George and tell him to play that song again. And George would announce on the radio, he'd say, the king and those boys are on the way in, boys and girls, you know, and boom, 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 tell about it. So he was giving them a running description of us coming in and listening to Tom Jones. And then Tom Jones later became a very close friend with Elvis. Very close friend.
We were down in the den. I think we were playing records and listening to new demos for an album Elvis was going to do. And Charlie came in. I didn't realize he was, you know, so short. And I was glad to see him because that made me, I used to be the shortest guy in the group, and along comes Charlie. Now he's the shortest guy. So I was very glad to see Charlie Hodge, but Elvis said, George, this is Charlie Hodge. I met him in the Army. He used to be the Pardon River Boys. I said, yeah, I remember you. Used to come out with that coat case, and we all laughed. And Charlie said he'd heard Elvis talk about me quite a bit. So you're the disc jockey from Memphis, a good friend of Elvis? I said, yeah. And Charlie and I kind of hit it off pretty good.
Elvis always would dress for all occasions and everything. We had, like driving across country, we had jumpsuits with our name on it.
He had a great time with the truckers, didn't he?
Elvis drive the bus going across, and these truckers would recognize him. Going across, and they'd blow them big air horns, and Elvis would blow his horn, man. And then he'd like racing them across country. Of course, it wasn't a race, but he had fun. He was playing with the truckers, you know. He had his own truck, customized, naturally. But he dressed special always. Elvis was proud of who he was, and never wore a disguise that I know of at all. And he would always dress the way Elvis was supposed to look. So he was dressing for the fans every day.
A lot of pride.
Yeah, a lot of pride in what he had done, what he had accomplished, and who he was. And Elvis could dress, nobody else would look that good in those clothes, but he would look fantastic, you know. You know, it's funny, when we'd leave Los Angeles going to Hollywood, or coming to Memphis, and we'd leave and nobody'd know what time we left. But somehow, when we got to Graceland, even if we flew, it's not going bus, if we left tonight, caught a plane, and it's midnight here, and 6 o'clock in the morning we were landing in Memphis, there'd be a crowd there waiting. Somehow the fans knew we had left, and they passed the word to each other. The same thing we'd go to L.A. There'd be nobody around the house in L.A. We'd leave late at night on a plane, go to L.A., get to the house, crowd of people standing out there when we got there. They kept in touch with, they had their own underground.
They knew where you were.
They knew where we were, yeah. when we'd get into a town, we'd be on tour, and we'd get off the plane. Sometimes they'd have like 2 or 3 Cadillac limousines there, and Elvis was getting one, and Dr. Nicopoulos and myself were getting another one, and somebody else another one. Then we always had the bus for everybody else. And if there were any fans outside the airfield there when we went out, they didn't know which one to follow. Because Elvis could be in the front one, he could be in the middle one, he could be in the back one. Unless you could really get a good look at them. And the way those cars were moving, because the police were always the greatest anywhere we went. They gave us a police escort. So when we left the place, we was already doing 30 or 40 miles an hour when we hit the highway, you know. But Elvis, we did that every so often. You know, Elvis would be in one car, I'd be in another car with Dr. Nicopoulos, and then you couldn't tell. It might not be anybody in those cars. Elvis might have been on the bus also with the rest of the guys. In fact, I remember one time when we were playing here in Tennessee, and we had a limousine to take us to the concert, and there's so many people outside the motel, we thought we was going to turn over the car, and from then on to the next 2 nights we did concerts, we rode in the bus because we figured they couldn't turn that over. The fans would get excited.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Now, tell me about the secret mission you had in regards to Elvis's wedding.
When Elvis decided to get married, it was like mission impossible, man. Very few people knew what was going on, you know. Joe Esposito knew, and I knew, and the Colonel, of course, knew, because Colonel set it all up. And all the guys thought I was driving Colonel down to Palm Springs, because that was one of my normal jobs, drive him to Palm Springs, go down Monday morning, pick him up, and drive him back. But what we were doing during this whole period of time is we was heading, like, going to Palm Springs, but see, just before you get to Palm Springs, you turn left and go to Vegas. So we were going to Vegas, and the Colonel was setting up Elvis's wedding. And we couldn't even talk to each other about it. Everything had to be kept, each person doing what they're doing. Nobody else knows what the other person's doing. And so this went on until time for Elvis to get married, and then we left the house in the car, drove to the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, drove downstairs, went up and stayed in one of the rooms for 2 hours. Then after we got early in the morning, you could see any cars for it. We went down and got the cars and drove the rest of the way to Palm Springs. Then got up the next morning, everybody loaded in planes and went to Las Vegas. Well, there's all the news media down there ready to grab it, you know, and get pictures of Elvis's wedding. Then all of a sudden, we're in Las Vegas. And the media, Colonel kept it so it wasn't like a circus. And Elvis and Priscilla got married, and then they came to the wedding breakfast. And that's where the media got to see them for the first time, and they were now man and wife. But the Colonel handled that so there would be no circus. His marriage could have some elegance about it, you know, some privacy. And it was just beautiful.
Charlie, tell me, after Elvis and Priscilla got married, the close-knit family you all were, how did your own personal lives change, whether at Graceland or in California, wherever?
I think my favorite time of living with Elvis, where it was more like a family, was when Elvis and Priscilla got married. Priscilla took over the running of the household, you know, and planning the meals and everything. And we ate dinner every evening in the dining room, like at Graceland and also at the house in L.A. And Priscilla would sit at a certain place, Patsy and Gigi at another place, and me at another place. And we'd have a meal every evening. It was like a family. And all the guys who used to come there, Priscilla told them, I remember, said, oh, you guys are welcome to eat what we're having for dinner. But you eat what we have. You don't come in here and place an order like it's a short order cook. But this is a home, not a short order restaurant. And she began to plan, and it felt like a home. You know, there was always one room that was Charlie's room. And she just fixed this up with my favorite colors and everything, you know. And we'd have dinner there in the evenings, and Joe and Joni would come up and join us, you know, Joe Esposito and his wife, Joni. Sometimes Colonel Parker and Tom Diskin, his aide, would come up and have dinner with us, and it was like a family, you know, and it felt good. I missed it when their marriage was over. I really missed that.
Yeah, Charlie lived at Graceland, and I think that really was good for Elvis because Elvis, truth be known, Elvis really liked to have as many guys as he possibly could live at Graceland.
Well, it's funny, when I first moved into Graceland, my room was upstairs, you know? And then Elvis decided he needed a bigger closet. So I moved downstairs, and they knocked the wall out and took my bedroom and made a closet out of it. And it was a regular-sized bedroom. It's just he needed that bigger closet. Then I moved downstairs into a room next to where the 3 TVs are in the wall, and I lived down there for years. And then the last couple of years that Elvis was alive, I lived in a garage apartment. And it's kind of like I had my own living room out there and own huge bedroom. And I could bring my friends in to visit with me without taking them inside Graceland. But Graceland is just the greatest memories in the world, man. That's where we played, we planned things, got ready to go to Hollywood, came back from Hollywood. There's so many memories there.
You were in many of Elvis's movies, and I remember a part you played in the movie Charo.
We were on location in Arizona, and Elvis was, he was looking forward to doing a Western, you know, to where he was, in the picture, he's like a gunslinger, a Charo. And then we got there and the script started changing because, well, Elvis said it was about the time that they started talking about all the violence on television and in movies and everything. So Elvis, he said, well, the gunfights are turning into dirty looks, you know, and he went over to Charles Marcus Warren, who wrote the script for that movie and was the director. And he said, what's wrong, Mr. Warren? And he said, Elvis said, they called me 3 weeks ago and said, we're doing an Elvis Western. They didn't say we're doing an Elvis movie and it's a Western. We're doing an Elvis Western. And said, and I had to write this thing in 3 weeks. And he looked at Mr. Warren, he said, Mr. Warren, let's do our job, take the money, and run. I was walking around on the set of Clambake one day, and we'd been having a water battle. You know, we had water guns, and then that wasn't enough. We'd get a glass of water, and sometimes take shaving cream, put a head on it, you know, to have our water battles. And then it got into buckets of water. And I was standing around the edge of Elvis's trailer waiting for him to come out, and one of the guys had climbed all the way to the top of that studio, one of those catwalks, and a bucket of water hit me right in the head, you know. And I looked up, and the second bucket got me right in the face. You know, my shirt was just drenched. So I went over to the wardrobe and got me a dry shirt, and then I went over and put it in one of those big blowers they have on the set to keep the air circulating. I hung it up in front of it, you know, to dry. And about every 20 minutes or so, I'd go back over and feel it, and it's still wringing wet, you know. And I'm telling you, this went on all day. Every 20 minutes or so, we went out, we broke for lunch. It was gone an hour. I come back and it was still wet. So one time, I went around there and felt it was still wet, and so I walked around the edge of the trailer, and I turned and sneaked back and looked around, and Elvis had a fire extinguisher and was getting it all wet again. He'd been doing that all day long. We was doing the picture of Trouble with Girls. It was one of those pictures where we were having water battles, you know, and firecrackers would light around each other, and just, you know, just things to do when they weren't shooting. And it was getting towards the end of the picture, and the last scene they shot was a scene where Elvis was lying on a circular thing that went around like that. It was all black, and he was in pajamas, so they could show that scene where he's floating through the air and so forth. So that was the last scene. And Elvis kept feeling something was up. He said, Charlie, said they're up to something. They're going to do something. Said, you and Joe find out what it was. Well, somehow I got sent to the colonel's office, and Joe got sent somewhere else, and we never did find out what they had planned. And what they did, as soon as the director yelled, cut, and then the assistant director says, that's a wrap. That means that's all the shooting is over with. Richard Davis and I think Jerry Schilling, all these guys had pies that they had gone and bought. And Elvis raised up, and by the time he raised up, he caught pies coming in every direction. He was picking up just meringue pie and throwing it back at them like that, you know. And just got pie all over. Well, he went and cleaned up. He said, find out where they are. And Debbie Reynolds, Bill Reynolds' brother, was Elvis's makeup. man. That was Debbie Reynolds' brother. And he was over at this little bar, kind of catty-cornering from the movie studio, with his friends laughing, having a beer. Oh, we got Elvis, man. He's been shooting those firecrackers. We got him this time. Well, Elvis sent us guys to grocery stores, and we went and bought whipped cream. We must have had 20 cans of whipped cream. So we went over to...
Finally, it's good to see somebody or hear somebody see and get a feel that somebody wasn't there just for the ride. You know, it really feels sincere, and I always got this feel from Charlie Hodge, though. You know, but we not done. This is part 1. Part 2 coming up, and we'll talk some more. But drop me a comment. Let me know what you think so far.